Okay, good evening. Today we're learning Maseches Sanhedrin Daf Lamed Gimel. We're starting about 12 lines or so from the bottom of Lamed Beis Mid Beis at the two dots. We are now picking apart the Mishnah, which highlighted 10 nafkaminas between Dinei Mamanis and Dinei Nefashis. It says the Gemara over here, Dinei Mamanis, Poskin. We spoke about the fact that by Mamanis, you can be posech, you can begin the litigation, you can begin the dialogue, both with good and with bad. But by Dinei Nefashis, you're only allowed to start with good. Heichi Amrin. And what is it that we say when we're trying to have this conversation? Amar Rav Yehuda Hachi Amrin Lahu, Mi Yemar Kida Amrisu. You want to come say that this guy murdered someone? Who says it's like you? So that is a positive comment, right? Because we're knocking down the negative information. Amar le'ula v'ha chasminan lehu. Hold on one second. How can you say that? You're being chosein. What does this mean? So it says Rashi, 2 lines into the very wide lines of Rashi, 8 lines from the bottom. Dibur hamaschel v'ha chasminan lehu. Chosmin anu SPM. We're shutting down the Eidim. Kshanu makchishanu. So v'yachzru behen besoch de dibur. And they could undo their edus right away. They say this guy's a murderer, and then I say, how do you know? They say, all right, fine, we recant. And if that's the case, then we have this scenario of chasima where we're shutting down the edim, which is also not allowed. So how do we navigate this? Says Gemara, why? Who cares? Shut him down. We don't want this guy to die anyways. He's a bad guy. He belongs in prison. But who says that we want him to die through capital punishment? What? No, I mean, not state like this. No, not that I know of. I've never heard of one.
They don't really have aid in.
Yeah, but that's an indecision. It's not like a Torah punishment. It's not that thing. Yeah. Says the Gemara Milo Tanya, don't we have a brisa? Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer Messiah Edim mimakom lamakom. We move around the Edim, we schlep them around from room to room. Kadesha titarif daiton v'yachzru bahen. We want them to go back. So who cares if we shut them down? It says the Gemara Midami. Can you compare our Mishnah to the brisa that you just brought in the name of Reb Shimon ben Elazar? Hasa memela kametchu. Over there, they're doing it on their own. But hacha here, when we say, if our first response to them is mi yemar kida amrisu, who says that what you're saying is true? If that's our first response, so that's too much biyadayim, and that's not allowed. It could be that we're chosman. It could be that indirectly we're chosman, but we can't be chosman. We can't muzzle them directly. Ela Amar Ula, answer number 2. Hachi Amrinan, here's what we say. Yesh lecha edem lehazima. Are there any edim? We would ask the defendant. Right now we're not talking to the edim anymore. Now, edim number 1, Reuven and Shimon give their testimony. And after the testimony, what's the first positive comment? Remember, that's what we're trying to find out. What's the first positive comment? Is the first positive comment to the Baal Din where we say, hey, do you have Edim that could possibly undermine those Edim to say Manu Hayisem they were out of town? So Amrle Rabba, you're not allowed to have a psicha of a schus for one, which is the Baal Din, that is a creation of a chov for another. This is a built-in, baked-in halacha, one that is not intuitive. So what this means is that when our Mishnah on the top of Lamed Aleph Amid Beis says that by din and nefashos we're poseach b'schus, that we're only posechim b'schus, it has to be a schus that isn't to the detriment of another person. But here, if what the dayanim are saying to the defendant is, do you know someone who could be mazim the first edim? So then it's a schus for the Baal Din while being a chov for the first set of edim, and that's not allowed. Says the Gemara, chovaso, is this really such a negative? Oh, it's not. They're not going to get killed right away. So says the Gemara, perhaps we could twist this just a little bit to make it work. Says the Gemara, Hachi Amina. Ilu shasik hai adem migmar dina. If the defendant is quiet until all of this is over, and then umaisi edim umazim lahu, and then he brings edim that will say that really Reuven and Shimon are edim zomamin, habilecho vaso shalzeh, then still it's going to be the case that it's a schus for the Baal Din and a chov for somebody, and that's not allowed. So now let's try another answer. What is this positive line that we say for Dine Nefashos? Elam Rabba, we're 4 lines from the bottom. Amrinan, what we say to the defendant is as follows. Amrinan le yesh lecha edem lahakrishan. We don't want to do hazama. Hazama creates a scenario where it's a chus for one and a chov for the other. But just be makrish. Just have someone who said, don't say imanu hayisem. But just say, I disagree with your data. There was no rain that day. Something that just kind of undoes their possible edus. So that works. And another answer that's going to be given, we'll have a few more. Rav Kahana Amar, mi divrechem nizdakia ploni. It's kind of like a projection. From the way things are going, he's probably not going to get killed, right? Abai v'Rava damar tarbayu, they both say, Amre abrinan le, ilo katalt lo sidchal. If you didn't kill anyone, you have nothing to worry about. It's like when you tell someone to tell the truth. If you're innocent, you don't have anything to worry about. Rav Ashi Amar, Kol mi she'odea lo zchus yovo b'yilamed lo. That's the nice thing we say. That's a zchus. Anyone who has something nice to say, please, please come forth and say it. That's what the Brisa says at the bottom of the page. Tanya, the Brisa says, Kavasada bai v'Rava. Rebbe Omer, the pasuk says, in regards to Anisha Sota, Im lo shachav ish osecha v'im lo satis. If you didn't sleep with this man, v'chule, turning to the top of Lamed Gimel Aleph, mikan sheposchem b'din nefashos tchila lizchus. So this is the Marimakom. We learn it from Sota, which is that the pasuk says, Im lo shachav ish osecha v'im lo satis. That's what Abai v'Rava said. What did they say? Let's get a quote. Ilo katalt lo sidcha. If you didn't kill anybody, you don't have anything to worry about. And that is seemingly what the Brisa says as well. Very good. So that means, let's just summarize this Nakuda. What does the Gemara say is the application of the halacha that by din and nefashos we highlight as chus? That is to say, if you are innocent, you have nothing to worry about. That is considered to be the positive comment. Next, and this is a long sugya, the Gemara says as follows. At the top of Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph on the second line, din and mamanis machzirin, we said that we can reopen and rejudge a case of dinei mamanis bein lechov, bein l'schus. Urminhu, how can you say that? I'm going to show you a case where you can't be choser. Donis hadin, ziko esachayev, chiyev esazakai, time esator, tir esatame. In all of these cases where the judge is judged incorrectly, masha asa asui vishalem mi beso. There's no chazara. You're right, Bishalimi Beso, that the dayan has to pay, but we don't reopen the case. We don't start over. We don't we don't bring new evidence. Just it's done. The psak is done. So now we have a stira between our Mishnah, which seems to indicate that we do have a chazara. I shouldn't even say indicate. It's really black on white. The Mishnah says very clearly that by dinei mamanis machzirin bein l'schus bein l'chova. That when it comes to dinei mamanis, we reopen cases that was judged negatively with positive information, or that was judged negatively with negative information. We reopen in both cases. But what do we do about this brisa? We're going to refer to this brisa as the one from Bechoros, even though we saw it quoted in other places in the Bavas. We even saw it in this Masechta. But over here, we have two Mar Makomos. We have our Mishnah and the brisa from Bechoros. So now we're going to see a whole host of answers, which will cover the next Amud. Amar Rav Yosef lo kasha. Kan b'mumche, kan b'she'enu mumche. When we're dealing with a mumche, so then a mumche, Rashi says at the top of the page, second line, b'mumche yesh lo koach lachzor, v'lo matzi l'meimar lei bal din, ono ki taima kamo didach avidna. Aval b'she'enu mumche matzi amar lei mi yemar de taima basra didach ikar, dil makama ikar. You don't know what you're talking about. So the first, the mumche is allowed to be choser, but the eno mumche is not allowed to be choser. So that's how we could answer up our Mishnah. Our Mishnah must be talking about a mumche, because our mumche, our case says that we can be choser. The brisa from Bechoros must be talking about a case of she'eno mumche. Says the Gemara of mumche machzirin. You are under a strong assumption, as Rashi very clearly articulated, that if the person who's a dayan is a mumche, that we are allowed to be choser. How can you say that? Vaktani, the very same brisa from Bechoros, has an end to it. Let's look at the end of the brisa. Im hayamumche lebezdin, pater mi l'shalem. But what does it not say? You can be choser. It says he has to pay, but not to be choser. So now we're back to our initial question. You wanted to say, who was it? You wanted to say Rav Yosef, that the difference between our Mishnah and the Bryce and Bechoros is that our Mishnah is talking about a mumche, so you can be choser. And the Bryce and Bechoros is talking about an eno mumche, so you can't be choser. Not true. Because the very Bryce itself in Bechoros says that a mumche is not choser, but he's just pater milashalim. And with this, we reject the answer of Rav Yosef, and we move on to the second answer. 8 lines down. Amar Rav Nachman kan sheyesh gadol heimenu b'chachmo v'minyan, kan she'ein gadol heimenu b'chachmo v'minyan. This is a little turn of phrase. It doesn't mean in volume of people. We're talking about one dayan, right? We're talking about a single man party. So normally the phrase of gadol b'chachmo v'minyan is a line that we use when a din of chazal is going to be overturned. When can a din of chazal be overturned? When the bezdin that wants to overturn is gadol b'chachmo v'minyan. But here we're only talking about an individual, and the point is where the person who's doing the overturning is a bigger Jew, then he's allowed to be choser. But if the person is not a bigger Jew, then he cannot be choser. Answer number 3. Rav Shesha Samar Khan Shetav Vidvar Mishnah. When can one be choser? That's if you make a colossal error. You don't know your Mishnayos. You don't know an aleph from a beis. You sit there talking out of your mouth like you know. You don't know. So if you're toeh and then you get caught in that, you can be choser, no problem. But kan shetav b'shikul hadas. But another is where a posek has to use a shikul hadas. He has to use his own judgment, and his own judgment is kind of in the gray. It's between the landmarks, and it's hard to tell what the psak is. We're going to define what shikul hadas means in a moment. Amar Rav Shesha Samar Amar Ravasi. Ta b'dvar Mishnah, ta b'shikul hadas. I'm sorry, ta b'dvar Mishnah choser, ta b'shikul hadas eino choser. So this is our answer. We're going to dig in a minute, but let's just paint our picture. Obviously, our Mishnah, where it says that in Dinei Mamonis you can be choser, bein l'chaya, bein l'schus, what is that talking about? That's where the mistake that the Dayan made is he didn't know basic Mishnayos. But in the Brisa from Bechoros, when we say you cannot do that you cannot be choser, what must he be talking about? Where you were toa b'shikul hadas. Amar le Ravina le Ravashi, afidu toa b'Reb Chiya v'Reb Oshaya. What about the Brisas that were put together by Reb Chiya and Reb Oshaya? Okay, they're not in the same standing as a Mishnah, but perhaps we should say that if a person makes a mistake with those Brisas, they should also be able to be choser, just like Mishnais. Says the Gemara, Amar le in, yes, we have a broader understanding of what a Mishnah means over here. Ta b'dvar Mishnah means any Tanaic literature. If I missed that and I'm the posek, that's on me and I can be choser. The Gemara continues, pushing to find the limit, the upper limit of what's considered to be Toa b'dvar Mishnah. Afilu b'derav Shmuel. Oh, hold on one second. Hold on. Now we're talking about Amoraim. Now we're talking about Memraos, conversations and comments and psakim from Amoraim. So Amar Le, he says, absolutely. So then he takes it to the next level. Afilu b'didi b'didach. Even me and you, we're Amoraim too. We only live a generation or two after Shmuel. And you said Shmuel is included in Ta b'dvar Mishnah, that if I don't understand a din of Shmuel and I make a mistake, I can be choser. So it says the Gemara, Amar Le, Atu anan katle kani ba'agma anan. What are we, the people who cut the reeds down by the swamp? We're Talmid Chachamim. So this is fascinating, because that means that anyone who knows our Masorah and who knows it well, and you make a mistake, you're just Ta b'dvar Mishnah. So I'll just give an example. If a person gives a psak completely against the shach, and nobody argues with the shach, you made something up. That's called Ta b'dvar Mishnah. I'm a little bit extending, but I think the point is accurate. It's on the nose, but I'm saying it without a marmako. You can't. It seems to me pashut. Yeah, it seems to me pashut. What?
Clearly accepted halacha at that point.
It's undisputed, right? That's what it seems to be. It's undisputed, because we'll see, and I'm saying this with another bit of color that you may not have yet, but you will, which is that shikul hadas is when there is a dispute. So here, the flip side of that is Ta b'dvar Mishnah is your Nama Aretz. Everybody knows the Mishnah Berurah holds it back. Today in my Moel WhatsApp chat, this was the shiloh that was going around. We know that on Shabbos, the Moel or the rabbi makes an announcement, we're about to make a Borei Priagov, and everybody have in mind Kiddush. What about Kiddush b'makom suda? There's no mizonos there. The mizonos are in another room. You're separated by a huge brick hanging wall. So why isn't that a problem of Kiddush b'makom suda? The Mishnah Berurah holds that you should not make Kiddush unless you're in the same room as the food. Afalpi that the Rav held you had to cover the mizonos. There was a famous story at some Kiddush. He was like a guest. He made everybody take out tablecloths and cover all the mizonos by Kiddush. Nobody's really, to my knowledge, makbid like that other than him. Anyways, I know Rabbi First does this. I've been told by Rabbi Robinson to do this. I do this. Rabbi Mutanki does it. Every shul I've been in, basically on Shabbos, does this. Okay, so today I called Rabbi Reese. And I said, Rabbi Shlita, teach me Torah. I'm a Moel. Shabbos mornings, Borei Pri Hagafen, but we make the announcement. Everyone, please have in mind. But the food's on the other side. He's like, yeah, no. It's like you should really have the Mavarech should have Mazonos so that he can eat
Really?
a kazayas, the Kiddush b'makom Suda. He said, but yeah, but you could also drink a revius of wine beyond the Malo Lugmav.
I mean, I've heard the announcement, but.
So it's not so from. Yeah. So that one of the guys in the chat's like, maybe we just rely on it b'diavad. I'm like, why would we do that? We can go make Kiddush in 5 minutes. So I threw this out there. I've never seen this. I said, maybe it's like a bracha sheina tzricha shtickle. Like it's the same borei pri hagafen. You're going to make it in 5 minutes. It's mutter, but like pasnesh, you just.
I don't know. Really don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
But maybe without Kiddush, you're putting the Mavarich in a bad spot when he's drinking the mole, assumedly drinks the wine. Drink the wine.
Yeah, whoever the mavarich is.
Mavarich drinks the wine. If it's not Kiddush Mokum Suda, how's he drinking?
So he has a chisaron, correct? But right.
So okay, but he doesn't have. But it's
so then he should drink a revius of wine, right? That's a kula though. That's not lechatchila.
Maybe that's why.
So Rabbi Reese recommended.
What, then he's gonna go and make Kiddush again? I mean, of course, somebody else could.
Yeah, but it's usher to do that. We don't make Kiddush unless it's b'makom suda. You're right. For the moel, it's a problem. So anyways, that's like a shikula, it's a shtickle shikula das. Like you could see, she says the kind of the kind. So what we're saying up until now, and I think the way to say it is that when a halacha, when a halacha is undisputed and the posek is an am haaretz, you can be choser. You want to be a posek? Givaldik. Go learn every shach and taz. That's great. You need to know everything before you stand there and comfortably answer questions that are bigger than you are. So it says the Gemara, if what you're saying is that the undisputed is what we can be choser on, so then what does it mean to say shikol adas, where you're not allowed to be choser, right? Because remember our question. Our Mishnah says you can be choser by dinei mammon, it's bein l'schos bein l'chova, but the Brisa Mechora says you can't be. So what's shikol adas, which is effectively the Brisa, which says you can't be choser? Amar Papa, let's define it. You go and train trei tanoi, trei amoroi, Depligi ahadade. We have a machlokas tanaim or a machlokas amoraim. V'lo itmar hilchasa lo kemar v'lo chemar. There is no clear psak one way or the other. And while that's true, there still is a minhag, but there's no clear psak. V'ikri v'avad kechad minayu. The posek paskins one way. Afal pi that v'sugya d'shmaitin as like idach. So the way people behave is like the other way. So let's say I'm the posek on this one. I paskin that you should make kiddush in shul without mazonos. But most people don't do that. So there you're not allowed to be choser. Hainu shikul adas. Why? Because you could be right. You could be right. It's a shikul adas. It's the language was v'lo itmar hilchasa lo kemar v'lo chemar. When a posek is using their judgment, they're making a judgment call. So then that's a whole new ball game, and you cannot be choser on judgment calls. You can only be choser when you say something that is undisputed and you're wrong, categorically wrong. There's no extra shitas. Das Yachid doesn't count. You found one sheet of Rav Meir. We don't paskin like him, so or whatever the case may be. That doesn't work either. Very good. So now this was our third answer, but our second acceptable answer. The first answer that we gave didn't work. It was mumche and eno mumche. The second answer that we gave was gadol b'chachmo b'minyan. Then you can be choser, but eno gadol b'chachmo b'minyan can't be. And this answer over here is kan sheta b'davar mishnah. There's an undisputed piece of halacha. That's our mishnah, which says you're allowed to be choser. And the brisa from Bechoros says not that way. That it's talking about shikul adas, and you can't be choser. So Eisei Rav Hamnuna, the Rav Sheshes, Maisa B'Para, there's a story of a cow. Shenitzala ha'em shala, its mother was taken away. It's actually a little inaccurate. Its motherhood was taken away. Take a look at Rashi, a drop lower than where we are. Ha'em shala, Beis Heroyon, a hysterectomy, right? All of the organs that are used, the uterus, presumably ovaries, whatever the case may be, those are removed. Let's go back into the Gemara, back into this brisa. This too is a brisa from Bechoros. So this cow had this hysterectomy. He paskin that this animal was now a trefa because it no longer had these organs. And he paskin that the animal needed to be fed to the dogs. It's a trefa. And then the story went up the chain, and it went to Yavne, and the Rabbanim in Yavne said not that way. The Rabbanim in Yavne said it's taka, not a treifa. She'amar todos harofe ein para v'chazira yotes mi Alexandria. No pig or cow could leave Alexandria in Egypt, Shal Mitzrayim, el im ken chodchen ha'im shelo kedei shelo teled, in order to ensure they're sterile so that they don't procreate. Now, this part's not super clear over here what the Todos piece is, but nevertheless, the Chachamim in Yavne were matir, and they said this animal wasn't a treifa. So look at what Rabbi Tarfon said. Amar Rabbi Tarfon, halacha, halcha chamorcha Tarfon. He's talking to himself, looked in the mirror. Oh, yeah, your donkey's gone. Why? Because now I have to pay. Now I have to pay. What does that mean I have to pay? Wasn't this just a case of Tabid Var Mishnah? Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, pater ata, shekol hamumche lerabim pater mi l'shalim. Now, v'i isa, if you want to say that a dayan can be choser in a case like this, and what case is this? Of ta'abid var mishnah, right? He was just wrong, Rabbi Tarfon. Sorry to say that, I don't want to sound chas v'shalom negative about Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon seems to be wrong. So, lemale, that's what Rabbi Akiva should have said to him. Lemale b'dvar mishnah, so the fact that Rabbi Akiva didn't say that to Rabbi Tarfon shows us that Tobit Var Mishnah is not choser. And that is a stira to the answer of Rav Sheshes. We said, how do we answer up our Mishnah and the Bryce and Bechoros? Our Mishnah is Toa Bidvar Mishnah. He made a mistake in a basic psak that was undisputed, and you can be choser. And the Bryce was not that way. Says the Gemara, based on the story that we just said about the hysterectomy, about the para, that the amus, the femininity of that animal was removed. So there we said, Eino choser. Says the Gemara, no. The answer still stands. You misunderstood. We're 2/3 of the way down, 3 lines before the white lines. Chada ve'od ka'amar. Really, the subtlety of Rabbi Akiva's answer was double layered. Chada, the Toa b'dvar Mishnah ata. First of all, you made a mistake, Rabbi Tarfon, in a Mishnah. The Toa b'dvar Mishnah is choser. Taka true. And the answer that we saw earlier, Rav Sheshes, still holds true that our Mishnah is talking about Toa b'dvar Mishnah. You can be choser. And the Brisa from Bechoros is talking about Toa b'shikul adas, and you can't be choser. But there's another layer. Inami b'shikul adas toyis. Even if you want to say that your error was in shikul adas, mumche l'rabim ata v'chol mumche l'rabim pater mi l'shalim. Miman of shach, you're going to be a safe bet. And says the Gemara, questioning this whole case. We had said halfway down that Rav Hamnuna asked a question to Rav Sheshes from this brisa to question Rav Sheshes' assumption that a person who is told b'dvar Mishnah can be choser. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak l'Rava. Second of the long lines. My kamosi Rav Hamnuna l'Rav Sheshes. I don't even understand the question. Mi para? He's asking a question from a para. Para harei he'echila l'klavim v'leise de tehadar. What do you mean? Of course he didn't give back the para. The para's been eaten. It's all gone. Rabbi Tarfon made a mistake, a colossal one, right? He was told b'dvar Mishnah, but you can't say just stam bichozer. The 2,000-pound cow has been consumed by a pack of coyotes. What do you want him to do? There's nothing left anymore. So Hachi Kamarle says the Gemara, this is what's going on. If you want to say Ta'abidvar Mishnah Eino Choser, if you want to say against Rav Sheshes, that when a posek makes a mistake with undisputed halacha, that you can't be choser, al makam dina, it applies that the halacha is in place, and that explains Hainu de Kamafchid Rabbi Tarfon. That's why Rabbi Tarfon was afraid to lose his chamorcha. Remember his line, Halcha chamorcha Tarfon. The Ka'amar le'ihu, and what was Rabbi Akiva's response to Rabbi Tarfon's concern? Don't worry, mumche lebezin ata v'ata pater mi l'shalim. You don't have to pay. So it makes sense, says the Gemara, if you want to say ta b'dvar mishnahs eino choser. Ela I amris ta b'dvar mishnah choser. If you want to say, like Rav Sheshes says, that ta b'dvar mishnah is in fact choser, then lei malei, here's what should have been said. Kevan de'ilu hava'e para. If the para was still there, if it had yet to be fed to the dogs, dincha lav dina, your psak, Rabbi Tarfon, was wrong because you're Tobit Var Mishnah. V'lo klum avadata, you didn't do anything. Hashta nami, lo klum avadata. Then so too over here, nothing was done. So this adds a little bit of a question mark to the Shita of Rav Sheshes, and we're not sure if this is a valid answer. So the Gemara presents yet another answer, trying to figure out the difference between our Mishnah and Lamed Aleph, that tells us that in Dinei Mamanis we can be choser bein l'schos bein l'chov. Masha'en came the Gemara in Bechoros, the Bryce in Bechoros, which says you cannot. So Reb Chizda says, and this part is a difficult answer, Kan shenotal v'nosan biyad. One is talking about where it was notal v'nosan biyad, where money was taken in your own hands. That's the brisa. Kan in our Mishnah shalom notal v'nosan biyad. So where it's notal v'nosan biyad, where you handled the money on your own, eino choser. But where the money was shalom notal v'nosan biyad, that's our Mishnah, and you can be choser. So the Gemara says as follows, 7 lines from the bottom. Bishlama chayev atazakai. Kigon shenotan notal v'nosan biyad. I could understand the case where a person who was zakai was found to be chayiv, and what ended up happening? I said the guy who was zakai was chayiv, and what ended up happening? I took money from him. Kigon shenotal v'nosan biyad. I understand that half of our Mishnah on Lamed Aleph, where I misunderstood, I as a posek misunderstood the case, and I took money out of this guy's hands when he was really innocent. That case I understand. What I don't understand is the second part of the case in our Mishnah. Elazika es achayev. If there was a man who we thought was going to be chayev, but I was mizakeh him erroneously, meaning I didn't obligate him to pay. So then guess what? I didn't touch any of the money. And if I didn't touch any of the money, then how does that case work in our Mishnah? So says the Gemara, the Amar Le, where the Dayan said, Pater Ata, that you're Pater. Says the Gemara, Pater Ata is great, but v'halo natal v'nasan biyad. The two cases have to be similar. If our Mishnah is going to say that by Dinei Mamanis, you're machzirin, bein l'schos, bein l'chov, the cases need to be equal. But the case of bein l'schos and bein l'chov are not equal. One is where I touched the money, that is where I had initially told someone who really should have been innocent, you're guilty, and we take the money from him and give it to the other guy. And the other case is not like that, where all you say is pater ata. That's where I say to a guy who should have been chayiv that you're zakai, and in such a case, we don't take any money from him. The cases are not a level playing field. So says the Gemara, Keivan de Amar pater ata. Once the Dayan says that the person who is zakai, really he's wrong, but he calls the guy zakai, he says you're innocent. Once he says that you're pater ata, so that's ki'ilu, k'moshe notal v'nosan biyad dami. That's similar to that him actually touching the money, even though it's not. Rishonim are going to be required here to understand this line in Lamdas. Elamas nisan, but then we have to look back at our Mishnah. Elamas nisan de ketani, dine mamanis machzirin bein l'schos bein l'chova. We need to understand the case a little differently. Bishlam alischos, I could understand in a case where a person was found to be innocent. Mishkachas la de Amar le meikara chayvata v'lo natal v'lo nosan biyad. I could understand our Mishnah and Lamed Aleph, where initially the person was told chayvata. I am the Dayan, and I say that he is guilty, but I didn't take any money yet. Then I can be choser, no problem. But what's the case of chova, where I initially found him to be innocent, and then I accidentally said he's chayiv? What is that case where I can be choser? So says the Gemara, do Amar le pater ata, like we said before, that's got to be a case where the Dayan said pater. Says the Gemara, no, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. The Amris, Kevan Damar le pater ata, Kamosha notal v'nasan biyad dami. If you're going to make an equivalence between the phrase of pater ata, which the Dayan said to the person erroneously, thinking that the guy should have been zakai, he was wrong. If you're going to say that that's the same thing as notal v'nasan biyad, well, then he shouldn't be able to be choser because he handled the money. So says the Gemara, really, the case in our Mishnah on Lamed Aleph is Chadaktani. We're 2 lines from the bottom on Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph. Really, our case on Lamed Aleph is only talking about one case. What's the one case? The case is Dine Mamanis Machzir L'Schos Shehi Chova. Our Mishnah is talking about a Dayan that says that the Baal Din is chayiv to pay, and then he retracted. That's all that our Mishnah is talking about. It's not talking about 2 different cases. Afal pi that it feels that way. But that's what the Gemara says. It has to be we're squeezing a square peg into a round hole, because the phraseology of our Mishnah doesn't feel that way. The phraseology of our Mishnah seems to imply that there are two cases. That dine mamanis are machzirin. You can reopen a case of dine mamanis in a case where someone was chayav was found to be zakai, and in a case where someone who was zakai was found to be chayav. But says the Gemara, we're really only dealing with one case. That's fine. What's the equivalent on the din and nefashos side? The chavas agabe nefashos. What would be a similar case by din and nefashos? Says the Gemara, machzirin lizchus. By din and nefashos, what would we say? We only reopen a case when in din and nefashos, we're switching gears now to din and nefashos, only when a person could be found to be acquitted, but the ein machzirin l'chova. But, like we saw in our Mishnah, a person cannot be machzir l'chova. A person is not allowed to reopen a case if we thought this guy was innocent, din and nefashos wise, and now we found evidence that he's guilty. We will not, double jeopardy, as we would call it. The case is done. You cannot bring it back under these circumstances. Says the Gemara, machzirin l'schus, zchus grade so. I could understand what you're talking about, that we are machzirin l'schus, but only if it's meritorious, only to this guy. But the ein machzirin l'chova l'schus shechova chova sadaman. Says the Gemara, we need at least a case that's similar to the case of dine mamanis. But over here, when we say that we are not machzir l'chova, l'schus shechova, and talking about a case where really he's innocent, where would we have such a case? That sounds like there's two Baalei Din. Let's remember the case that we started from. We have two Baalei Din in the world of Mamanis. And we say, I thought you were Chayav, but now you're Zakai. The other guy thought I was Chayav, and now he's Zakai. We're dealing with two Baalei Din. But when there's a murderer, how many Baalei Din are there? One. So really, it isn't a level playing field between the world of Dinei Mamanis and Dinei Nefashos. So the Gemara says, Chovsei Deman. And the Gemara gives a very clever answer. Says the Gemara Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis 3 lines. Not Holakasha. Chovsei the Goel Adam. When a person kills B'shogeg, so now there's another player. If Ruvain kills B'shogeg and he kills Shimon, and Levi is Shimon's family member, until Ruvain gets his body into an Ir Miklat, the crossbows are out. No problem at all. Oh, now you're flipping the din? Now you're saying that I thought he was Chai, but now he's Zakai? But if now he's Zakai, he's really innocent, and he didn't kill B'shogeg, what changes for the Goel Adam? He can't kill anymore. So the halacha changes negatively for him. So says the Gemara, if that's true, Mishum Chovsei the Goel Adam Kadlinan Leilahai, because of this din, that we're not allowed to have a schus for the murderer, because there's a negative for the Goel Adam, so therefore someone's going to be put to death. That's an unbelievable idea. So says the Gemara, but and furthermore, just to double down on the question, my bain. The Gemara just assumes we're smart people. I didn't know what this meant at all. Thank you, Rashi. Rashi says bain. What is the question of the Gemara when it says v'od my bain? Fourth line of Rashi, dibur hamaschil bain. Bain tani bereisha bain l'schus bain l'chova. That we had said that when it comes to machzirin by dinei mamanis, we had said whether or not we're dealing with a schus or whether or not we're dealing with a chova. Alma, says Rashi, tarte milik tani. There's two cases. V'leika lefrusha l'schus he chova. You can't say that this is dealing with that case, because just like we saw with the Ir Miklat, you're going to say that Ruvain, the guy, he's going to be put to death because we're not allowed to stop the Goel Adam from allowing him to kill him. It's such a backwards thing to say. The Gemara says you're 100% right. Kasha, you're right. So we really don't know how to navigate this piece with a Goel Adam. We're not exactly sure how to understand our Mishnah, in fact, which means that the line of our Mishnah, which we thought was pretty simple, is actually not so simple. Let's try another answer. Rava Amar Kegon Shahayalo Biyado Mashkon Venatlo Mimenu. Maybe what we're talking about in the Bryce and Bechoros is where there was a mashkon, and we took it from him. And because money's changed hands, therefore, Eino Choser. What was the case of Timei Asat Tahor? Remember that the Brysa that we saw toward the bottom of the page spoke about Timei Asat Tahor. What was the case of Timei Es HaTahor? That's when a Dayan knew he was right. Agi Be Sheretz. He was so sure that something was Tameh, he touched it to a Sheretz. Tiher Es HaTameh. What is that case where he was Matar something that's Tameh? She'irvu Bein Perosav. There was a suffix to money, threw it into the pile, and he said, "You'll never know which one it is. Trust me, I'm right." And these are all cases where we would not allow someone to be choser. Again, this is a difficult sugya. I'm not making it. I tried to be clear. I'm just saying it's not an easy sugya. It really does require time to figure out all the pieces here. But in short, what we're trying to figure out is how we can make peace, make shalom between our Mishnah and the Brisa from Bechoros. That brings us to another 2 dots, about 10 lines down or so on Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis. We'll be stopping. We'll see how far we get before 9:30. Let's continue. Tana Rabbanon, Minayin liyotze mi Beis Din chayev. How do we know that if somebody walks out of Beis Din and their head is held low, they got a negative din? V'amar echad yesh li lelamed alav zchus. I can be melamed zchus on this person. Minayin shemachzirin oso. How do we know? And of course, we're talking about dinei mamanis because either way, actually. How do we know that even by dinei nefashos? What? Good question. Must have been dinei mamanis. Oh, actually, yeah. Why is he yotze? Why didn't nobody?
It's the same day. No?
Maybe it's dinei mamanis. No, it says dinei nefashos. I mean, the 2 dots says dinei nefashos. I don't know if that's a raya. Good question. Yeah.
Possibly you prove it.
Yep. That's correct. That's correct. So it says the Gemara minayin shemachzir no so that we do go back into court. Lomar naki al tarog. That's actually not the full pasuk. It's naki v'tzadik al tarog. But in this case, he's a naki, and we shouldn't put someone to death. Why was he yotze? I don't know. Good question, David. How do we know that if someone was acquitted, he was accused of murder, but he was acquitted? So, like we saw in our Mishnah, says the Gemara, Tzadik al Tarug. Same pasuk, it should be Naki v'Tzadik al Tarug. Why is he being called here a tzaddik? So here he's not being called a tzaddik because he's righteous. I mean, righteous people could be accused of things. That happens all the time. But here it's because we were matzik. We made justice, right? It's not tzaddik tzidkus, it's being matzik. And therefore, tzaddik al tarug, he already got a din of innocent, and therefore he's good to go. Amar of Simi Barashi, v'chilufa lemesis. It's not true in regards to a mesis. By a mesis, we have the flip. Dechsiv lo sachmo, lo sechase alav. That means the opposite is as follows. If he walks out of Beis Din chayiv, and we have edim that we could be mezakim to not be killed, we're not makabel them. It's exact opposite. And flipped, if taka he was zakai, and then we found edim that he should be chayiv as a mesis, we reopen the case. To be a mesis is the next level. You're worse than a murderer, literally. In halachic terms, you're worse than a murderer. Rav Kahana brings out the same result, but Masni, he learns it from another place, Michi Harag to Hargenu, from another pasuk about mesis. Ba minei Reb Zera me Reb Sheshes. Chayve galus should be mai. How do we treat chayve galios? People who are chayv to be exiled. Do we treat them like a murderer, in which case the rules are strict? Or do we treat them differently? Says Gemara, Asya Rotzeach, we treat them like a murderer. That means that once they are zakai, they cannot be made to be chayiv again. Chayiv malkios mai. What would be the din by people who are chayiv malkios? Asya Rasha. They have the same din as a murderer as well. That if in fact they were found to be zakai, we cannot then come back with more evidence and make them chayiv. Halfway down a little bit more, Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa very similar to what we just learned to answer Reb Zera's question to Rav Sheshes. Chayve galos minayin should be my asya rotzeach. Chayve malkios minayin asya rasha. That in all of these cases of Beis Din punishments, the basic guideline is for Beis Din punishments, not mamanis, but for Beis Din punishments, that if you come out zakai and then later evidence has been shown that you really are guilty, we ignore that evidence. We do not reopen the case. Be'ein machzirin lechova. We have a couple minutes left. Let's get to the next 2 dots. Amar Reb Chia bar Abba, Amar Reb Yochanan. V'hu shata b'davar she'ein hatzdukin modim bo. What are we talking about? Only for something that tzdukim don't even make a mistake with. About ta b'davar she'ein hatzdukin modim bo. If there's something so pashut that even the tzdukim admit to it, then we can be choser. After all, zil kari be ravu. Any little kid who went to Zilberman's knows exactly what's going on. Let's say that there was a case of adultery, and somehow the person, the Dayan made a mistake. It's not so complicated, right? But he made a mistake. So Amar le, Ademoktach yakir, while the fire is still burning, zil kotes karcha. Go cut your gourd and roast it. Namely, while we're still talking about the tzdukim issue, while the fire is still lit, you should apply this rule over there. Namely, it's pretty obvious. If you were wrong about the psak and they actually slept together, you should be choser. That's even the tzdukim, even the kari be'rav, even the kids would know that. It's marnami. We have the same idea. Amar Rav Ami, Amar Rav Yochanan. Ta'a b'noef choser. If a person makes a mistake about niyuf, about adultery, if in fact they did sleep together and you were just wrong about it, we're choser. Alahechi dami ein choserin. What would be a scenario where there is ein choserin by niyuf? So says the Gemara, there is one case. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, kigon sheta'a shelo kedarka. If a person, a posek, made a mistake, and he thought shelo kedarka didn't qualify as niyuf, afal pi that it does, in such a case, that would be the case of eino choser, because that's a drasha and not tzdukim. The only reason we know that niyuv is ben kedarka, ben shelo kedarka is because we have the Torah Sheba'al Peh. The tzdukim didn't have that. And because the tzdukim didn't have that, if you make a mistake with that type of niyuv, then it's taka the case that we are eino choser. We'll stop right here. Mir Hashem, tomorrow night we'll pick up at the 2 dots at the bottom of the page. Wishing you all a beautiful night.